Hey, what is up everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you with the review of the XFL on ESPN's 30 for 30. I believe it was called This Was The XFL. And as this show was honestly in one of its last breaks, I thought to myself, hey, don't you still have that XFL sweatshirt? And I said, yes. Yes, I do. And I almost went exactly to right where it was, still in my closet after all of these years. I believe they said 15 years later down the road. I honestly don't even know why I bought this sweatshirt back in the day, but still in the Stevie Breach Hall of Wrestling Shirts Hall of Fame. I will tell you that I was honestly drawn to this because of the fact that this was an ESPN documentary, mainly done on Vince McMahon and his creation with Dick Ebersol, the XFL. Anytime you get a peek behind the curtain at Vince McMahon, I think that it is a very good thing to get, because Vince, honestly, in the wrestling business is a very sort of hidden guy. Is the emergence of so many podcasts that are out there on the market today, that are people that have worked with Vince, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Chris Jericho, Bruce Pritchard. You get to see sort of like the behind the scenes Vince McMahon that you don't really know. The McMahon DVD that came out years ago was sort of a peak, but at the same time that was sort of washed with the WWE colors of the way they wanted Vince to be portrayed. And basically this documentary was basically set up, starting at the very beginning, having set up who Dick Ebersol was, who Vince McMahon was, how they came together, how they built their friendship. Of course, Dick Ebersol is a guy that was in the NBC family after leaving ABC. When he came there, he was one of the guys who helped co-create Saturday Night Live. Due to the success of that show, he sort of moved his way up to being in charge of NBC Sports. He built NBC Sports to be one of the largest, best-run sports television companies that there was. They had existing contracts with the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, PGA. Basically anything that happened in the world of sports was going to happen on NBC Sports. And that's just the way it was back in the day. Vince McMahon, I think everybody who's watching this is sort of behind the scenes of wrestling, realized that he took over the company from his father, merged it from being a regional wrestling company that was based around the New York area, and spread it across the country, taking over different wrestling territories, and just sort of eating up the whole United States and making one giant wrestling company that was basically going against just WCW, that was based out of the South at the time, that was sort of led by another, almost like Vince McMahon, Ted Turner. It didn't really play up on the fact of WWF versus WCW in this at all, or bring up Ted Turner at all, but it sort of would have been funny just to sort of hear what he thought of this whole creation. Then again, that with the creation of the XFL, it was going on during the dying days of WCW, but once it was sort of born, it'd be funny to hear what Turner thought of it. If even they had the existing deal with NBC, but with basically TNT and TBS kicking wrestling off of their networks, and basically wanting to go in a different direction, would they think to bring in football? They needed to replace something. It would be an easy, football for wrestling. Maybe it would have worked, maybe it wouldn't have. So I wonder if there even was a phone call made to put it on there, especially near the end when NBC was desperately trying to pull out of the XFL and their 50-50 deal. If Vince wanted to go on for season 2, would there be anybody else out there that wanted to keep it going? Bischoff came, a year later and worked for Vince. What if Vince and Ted worked together a year later after WCW closed? That would have been hilarious. But basically, Dick Ebersol, through his friendship with Vince McMahon, brought WWE, being Saturday night's main event, to NBC, which was a huge rating success. Some of the biggest ratings that were ever garnished with professional wrestling were built around Hulk Hogan and Saturday Night's Main Event when Macho Man Randy Savage, Andre the Giant, Ted DiBiase, the long list of legends that were back then during the day. Basically, when Dick Ebersol moved out of being just a guy directing NBC Sports and being the executive with NBC, he sort of had to leave the wrestling behind. And to me, that is sort of when Saturday Night's Main Event went downhill, whether that means there was no one from NBC guiding Vince McMahon and it just turned into a Vince McMahon television show. But if you're a fan or if you've been watching Saturday Night's Main Event on the WWE Network, you can really tell that there's a point when the show just drastically changes. And it's not because of the roster, it's not because the wrestling's not as hot anymore, just the show doesn't build the same way that it always did, and it just doesn't feel the same. So I think that Dick Ebersol did have a great deal to do with Saturday Night's Main Event being a huge success, as well as the main event being a huge success for NBC as well as WWF back in the day. We're coming up on We're coming up on the big anniversary of Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan on the main event, which I believe was held in Indianapolis, and that was one of the largest, most watched wrestling matches of all time. That, of course, is when Ted DiBiase paid for the plastic surgery of the referee, and it was exposed that there was the two brothers, the Hebner twins, were exposed as both being out there, and the false 3 count on Hulk Hogan. Andre the Giant won the WWF Championship. He gave it to Ted DiBiase, and that was a huge deal because that wasn't on Saturday Night's Main Event. I believe that was held on a Tuesday at 8 p.m., which was huge ratings and huge drive because Hulk Hogan at the time was larger than life. Once this all came together for the XFL in 2001, Dick Ebersol bought in to the Vince McMahon creation of the XFL. Vince McMahon was thinking that the NFL was becoming too much of a pansy league, that there were too many rules protecting the players, mainly being fair catches and no hitting of the quarterbacks and all sorts of things like that. Created his own 8-team league and just said this is what it's going to be. Dick Ebersol off at the press conference announcing the XFL realized that the NFL was leaving NBC for the first time and that he was going to be without football. Basically, I believe the football contract was for $500 million. NBC realized that they could make $400 million off of having the NFL, which means a $100 million loss, which does not make sense for NBC, and it didn't have to have football just to lose $100 million. So they took that money, they rolled it over, they bought into the XFL, and was thinking maybe they'd be able to find a replacement that was going to run in the off season and still garner huge success to come with it. They talked a lot about it was hard to get the XFL off of the ground due to the fact that nobody really knew what they were getting into. They had to book stadiums, they had to get players. The first thing the league went out and did was actually recruit and sign cheerleaders, thinking that cheerleaders, much like wrestling valets at the time, Sonny, Sable, Terry Reynolds, Mongo McMichael, Deborah McMichael, lots of girls like that. But they went out and got hot, attractive, basically strippers, to go out there and thinking that this was going to drive people to watch football. Once they actually got football on the ground, the XFL was something that the fans actually got behind for 1 week, bringing in huge ratings. They actually doubled the ratings which they promised to the advertisers. I believe the ratings was in the tens, somewhere in there. I'm not 100% sure, but they were huge at the time. But it was so funny because I remember hearing about the ratings being a huge success. Definitely Monday Night Raw with Vince McMahon was out there bragging. The first Monday Night Raw after the XFL debut was held in Atlanta. And it was actually a big co-branding event because at the time I believe that Vince had Raw, on TNT. It might have been TNN. No, they were on TNN. That's what it was, the Nashville Network, which then became something else, which then became Spike. The National Network is what it turned out to be, because at the time it was sort of like the Country Music Network. It was sort of like that. And they were branding themselves into which ended up becoming Spike Television. They were also on UPN. UPN and TNN bought into the XFL as well. They were showing the B games that weren't the number one game of the week that people would want to see. And they were sort of rolling along with what was going on in the whole company. When it comes down to it, there was a few players that found out how to market themselves. Mostly Death Blow, He Hates Me, Tommy Maddox, who was a former college football player, I believe for UCLA, which was actually drafted by Dan Reeves and the Denver Broncos to be the next John Elway. A lot of people will think of this analogy. Joe Montana, it was coming up sort of near the end of his career, but he still was in that prime. The San Francisco 49ers traded for Steve Young to become and be his backup, even though Steve would sit on the sidelines for, I believe, 3 years before he even got a chance to play. Everyone knew that Steve Young was a good quarterback. Denver wanted to have Tommy Maddox because they believed that he was going to be the guy. And I believe, if I remember right, Tommy Maddox had some personal problems in his life, which led him out of Denver. And I believe that John Elway would end up playing for close to 9 more seasons with the Broncos, because I don't think he retired until like 98 or 99. So he would have been there, God, years forever before he got the chance to play. If I remember right, he was drafted around 1990. But, Tommy Maddox, bounced around, ended up in the XFL, and he became the best player. He was the MVP of the league. He led his team to winning the $1 million game. He ended up being picked up by the Pittsburgh Steelers. At the end of the documentary, it said that he won Super Bowl whatever. I don't think he actually won it. I think he was the backup behind Ben Roethlisberger. But he did have success as being a quarterback in the NFL. I believe he did lead the Steelers to the playoffs at least once, maybe if not twice. In a couple games when Roethlisberger was the starting quarterback and got hurt, Maddox was able to come in and still play well and save games. Rod Smart went on to play with the Carolina Panthers, had a good career there, returning punts and kicks. Went on to play in the Super Bowl, like it said. And, they basically panned the XFL as being a bad league. I believe that the XFL was put on a grand stage very, very fast, without a whole lot. They kept showing these commercials that they were running for the XFL. I don't think the NFL really runs commercials. I think that basically if you would have ran a commercial basically saying the XFL football was coming to NBC, it was going to debut the Saturday night after the Super Bowl, I think people would have watched. I mean, they put, college football games, they put high school all-star games on there and brand them as the stars of tomorrow. They could have found a way to make this work. You're using NBC still, but not trying to make it seem like this was going to be the next NFL or the offshoot to the NFL. Just should have put football on TV, and I think people would have watched. They had good things, they had bad things. They hype up the fact that I have no idea what the heck's going on in that other room. I think they're watching some Disney show, Better in Stereo is how the theme of the song goes. But whatever. But, I thought it was good. I definitely like seeing the Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, and a lot of guys from ESPN, Vince McMahon being interviewed, as well as the coach, and a lot of other, people like Jesse Ventura were all turned out for this. So, good job. I would like to see one of these done on wrestling. I know that 30 for 30 did a short on the Von Erichs, which it can be found on Hulu, and it can also be found on YouTube if you really want to see it and don't have Hulu. But good stuff. I would like to see something done. I hate to see them do something on Monday Night Wars, but that definitely is something that might generate attention that they could do a documentary on. But WWE has already done a 20-part series on this, as well as done their own DVD on it. So, but if somebody from the outside wanted to pick up and say that they were a wrestling fan, like maybe the guy who did the backstage documentary in the 90s, maybe that'd be something we could see. So we'll see. Good job, ESPN. Good job, XFL guys. Peace out, everybody.